Hello and welcome to this sixth lecture of this online training program on foundational education leadership for early childhood care and education. Today what we are going to talk about is foundational education strategy for identifying and nurturing specific intelligence. We have already understood that the primary purpose of the foundational education stage is the exposure of the students to the multiple intelligence, which are 10 in number, but we are focusing mostly on 8, and then the identification of one dominant intelligence. So that is what is the primary purpose, and obviously education leaders need to nurture those intelligence and understand and be empathetic as well as solicitous to the fact that whether whatever be the dominant intelligence of the teacher leader, they need to throw that out of their minds and then focus on what intelligence the child is possessing, and for that appreciation of various kinds of talents is very important. So with this kind of a background, let us move further and understand what foundational education strategy is, and how to nurture specific intelligence in children, how to identify and how to expose children to various kinds of intelligence. So if you look at the foundational education curriculum, the first thing is the curriculum itself, and there should be diversity in the curriculum. All the intelligences need to be embedded in the curriculum. The intelligence areas like verbal, linguistic, mathematical, logical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, all needs to be embedded into the curriculum, and the proposed curriculum needs to be a diverse curriculum for exposure of the students. So you need to identify, and before identify you need to expose students to various facets of the intelligence. So the if you look at the columns, it talks about is strong in, likes to, learns best through. So these are the various ways in which you find out whether the child is good at or interested in or has a predilection towards or a passion towards which kind of a intelligence, right? And for that you need to, we have already outlined in the earlier, you need to repeatedly perform all these tasks, create those tools, techniques, centers, so that they get exposed to all this on a repeated basis. And the teacher leader needs to prepare a whole diary and a journal record for each and every student as to how he is progressing on different kinds of intelligence and which is the dominant intelligence he or she possesses. So if the student is strong in reading, writing, telling stories, memorizing dates, thinking in words, or likes to read, write, talk, memorize, work at puzzles, or learn best through reading, hearing and seeing words, speaking, writing, discussing and debating, then it's more likely that he has a predilection towards verbal and linguistic intelligence. Similarly, if the child is strong in math, reasoning, logic, problem solving patterns, or likes to solve problems, questions, work with numbers, experiment, work with patterns, learn best through working with patterns and relations, classifying, categorizing, working with the abstract, then he is more likely to have a mathematical and logical intelligence. So you have to understand that the first column is about interest and inclination, and the second column is about the predilection or the passion or the interest, and the third column is about the pedagogy through which the child learns the best. Then spatial, reads maps, charts, drawing, images, puzzles, images, things, visualization, etc. Design, draw, build, create, daydream, look at pictures, work with pictures, colors, visualizes, drawing. Then he has a spatial kind of intelligence. Bodily kinesthetic will be athletics, dancing, acting, crafts, using tools he will be strong in, or he will like to move around, touch and talk, body language, etc. touching, moving, processing knowledge through bodily sensations will learns best through these. Then bodily kinesthetic intelligence is the predominant intelligence. Musical, singing, picking up sounds, remembering melodies, rhythms, if the child is strong in that, or likes to sing, hum, play an instrument, listen to music, or learns best through rhythm, melody, singing, listening to music and melodies, then he has a predilection towards and more likely to possess musical intelligence. Similarly, if the child is strong in understanding people, leading, organizing, communicating, resolving conflict, selling, likes to have friends, talk to people, join groups, sharing, learns best through sharing, comparing, relating, interviewing, cooperating, then he has interpersonal intelligence and he has a predilection towards that. If he is strong in understanding self, recognizing its strengths and weaknesses, setting goals, likes to work alone, reflect, pursue interest, and learns best through working alone, doing self-paced projects, having space, reflecting, etc., then he has intrapersonal intelligence. Similarly, if he is strong, he or she is strong in understanding nature, making distinctions, identifying flora and fauna, likes to be involved with nature, make distinctions, and learns best through working in nature, exploring things, learning about plants and natural events, then he is more likely to have a naturalistic kind of intelligence. The moral intelligence and the existential intelligence is not that much talked about at the foundational stage, but these are also very important intelligences. The existential intelligence is not very too much to be emphasized at the foundational stage, but the moral intelligence can be, and it relates to the interpersonal intelligence, but it is a little different because there it is a question of ethics and law. So it is more a question of what is right and wrong, what is the right thing to do, what your conscience is telling, so that kind of a thing. So the moral intelligence is also an important thing to be inculcated at the foundational stage. The existential part I am really doubtful that at the foundational stage it must not be too much emphasized on. If you look at the pedagogy and talk about the pedagogy should be the pedagogy of action. It should be the pedagogy. So say for example, the objective of the teaching for the today's class is the letter D. The both capital and small has to be taught. So different kind of intelligent children needs to be taught through different kinds of pedagogies. So the linguistic intelligent people can be taught by telling a story with your pen, start at the top. The logical mathematical, what other letters does this look like? The spatial, what shapes can you see? Describe the lines. Do they look the same or something else? Musical, make up sounds to go with the shapes you are drawing. Poetry, etc. Bodily kinesthetic, with a partner move your body or make a DAD, or the D letters are important here. Interpersonal, peer feedback, critique, coach someone, etc. So that is the way they will learn. Naturalistic, they will learn by doing some kind of a sand tray, practice writing, can we say the letter in nature, can we see this letter in nature, etc. So that is the way a naturalistic will learn. Intrapersonal, people thinks in their lives with the letter D. So that is how the different intelligent children with different kinds of intelligence need to be taught with different. So all the children, so when we are talking about exposure, we don't know what intelligence is possessed by what children. So we need to expose the children to all kinds of pedagogy. We need to use all the pedagogy for this, so that different kinds of children will learn it a different way. So you need to, as a teacher in a classroom with maybe 30 odd students and only one teacher, you need to bring in this diversity of pedagogy. With this diversity of pedagogy, what will happen? different people will learn in different way. And here I would emphasize that the parents need to play a very important role, because they would understand the inherent intelligence in the children and what is the predilection of the children, what kind of intelligence he or she possesses, and then they can craft their learning according to that, and the pedagogies can be used and redesigned according to that. So we will talk about the 7-step process of a to-do list for teachers. So step 1 is focus on a specific learning outcome. So obviously learning outcome is a very important thing to decide before we start teaching. So you need to decide what is the learning outcome you are looking at, and that needs to be pre-decided, and then different kinds of pedagogies can be used, different curricula can be decided for that. So how to proceed further? So first step is always deciding on a specific learning outcome. So the second step is asking key questions, key multiple intelligence questions. So am I planning questions? This has been taken in the few other slides that will come. Am I planning questions from Armstrong 2000? So uh, for a linguistically intelligent person, you need to ask this: how can I use the spoken or written word to explain this learning objective? Similarly, for a logical mathematical, you need to ask this: how can I bring in numbers, calculations, logic, classification, or critical thinking skills to explain this concept or to achieve this learning objective? For spatial, you need to do: how can I use visual aids, visualization, color, art, or metaphor? Similarly, for musical, how can I bring in music or environmental sounds, a set of key points in a rhythmic or melodic framework? For bodily kinesthetic, how can I involve the whole body or use hands-on experience? For interpersonal, how can I engage students in peer sharing, cooperative learning, or large group simulations? Intrapersonal, how can I evoke personal feelings or memories or give students choices? Naturalistic, how can I incorporate living things, natural phenomena, or ecological awareness? So all these needs to be incorporated in a single learning objective. So it is not about what you I always remember this quote, that it is not what you cover, but what you uncover from the vast plethora of things that is out there, that matters. As a teacher, that is the objective you need to serve. So moving further, so you need to understand as a teacher that these are all the pedagogies I need to use, because there are different kinds of children with different kinds of intelligence. I don't know which kind of intelligence they possess, and I need to expose them to different kinds of pedagogies of learning, different kinds of intelligences. So this is the variety of pedagogies I need to bring to the class. And similarly, as a parent also, you need to do that repeatedly. So if you do it for 10 learning objectives, 20 learning, 100 learning objectives, you tend to identify that what the child is more interested in, where the child has a predilection towards, and that is the only way to identify the predilection, passion, interest, and inclination of the child, and that is the objective of the foundational stage. The foundational stage objective is not to burden children with knowledge and skill sets, some kind of attitude and some kind of a orientation towards educational system, and some kind of exposure to learning and identification of interest and inclination, and their learning predilections and passions needs to be identified, and their intelligence framework. So if that is achieved, the objective of foundational education stage is achieved. So that is the strategy one needs to follow as a teacher leader. Moving further, if you look at the teaching activities, materials, and instructional strategies, you have to consider all the possibilities. So if you look at all the intelligences, you need to plan your teaching activities in such a way. Say for example, for linguistic, you need to do lectures, discussion, word games, storytelling, choral readings, journal writing. For logical mathematical, you need to do brain teasers, problem solving, science experiments, mental calculation, number games, critical thinking. For spatial, you need to do visual representation, art activities, imagination games, mind mapping, metaphor, visualization. All of these you need to do. For bodily kinesthetic, you need to do hands-on learning, drama, dance, sports that teach tactile activities, relaxation exercises, musical, rhythmic learnings, rapping, using songs that teach, interpersonal, cooperative learning, peer tutoring, community involvement, social gatherings, simulations, intrapersonal, you need to do individualized instruction, independent study, options in course of study, self-esteem building. For naturalistic, nature study, ecological awareness, care of animals. So you decide on one learning objective, you cover a few learning objectives. You don't need to cover vast plethora of things that can be done at a later stage. So at this point in time, you need not cover and need not make the foundational education stage or the early childhood education as a downward extension of the primary education or the other stages where you are trying to develop the novice into a master. Here you need to expose the children to various kinds of pedagogies, what is possible, all kinds of. So keep the learning objective to the minimal and keep the pedagogies of exposure to the maximum. So similarly, for teaching materials, you need to use book, tape records, typewriters, stamp sets, books on tape. For linguistics, similarly, calculators, math manipulatives, science equipment, math games, etc. For logical mathematical, graphs, map videos, Lego sets, art materials, optical illusions, cameras, pictures library. For spatial, building tools, clay, sports equipment, manipulative, static learning resources. For bodily kinesthetic, tape recorder, tape collection, musical instrument, board games, party supplies, props for role plays. For interpersonal, self-checking materials, journals, materials for projects. For intrapersonal, and plants, animal, naturalistic tools, example binoculars, gardening tools, etc. For naturalistic. Looking at the instructional strategies, what can be done? You tell children to read about it, write about it, talk about it, listen to it. For the linguistic, quantify it, think critically about it, put it in a logical framework, experiment with it. For the logical mathematical brains, see it, draw it, visualize it, color it, mind map it. For the spatial brains, build it, act it out, touch it, get a gut feeling of it, dance it, bodily kinesthetic, sing it, rap it, listen to it. For the musical, teach it, collaborate on it, interact with it. So peer teaching is also a very important approach when we talk about interpersonal learning. And intrapersonal, connect to your personal life, make choices with regards to it, reflect on it. So when you are teaching numbers only, so you need to understand how many activities you do in a day, you count. So those kind of things you need to do. For intrapersonal, naturalistic, connect to the living things and natural phenomena. That is what you need to do. So considering the possibilities in terms of pedagogies, in terms of instructional strategies, in terms of teaching material, in terms of teaching activities, needs to be done by the teacher leader. Again, brainstorming is very, very important. That how I'm going to plan for different kind of intelligent people, because I don't know who is intelligent in what and what kind of intelligence is possessed by which children. So I need to have a diverse set of curriculum, pedagogy, teaching strategy, teaching material, etc. to facilitate this kind of a interaction and teaching learning process. Step 5 is select the appropriate and workable activities for your learner. So you also need to understand that at what stage the children are. At 3 years age, the activities will be different from 8 years with the same learning objective. The learning objective can be the same, but the activities can be different and more nuanced in case of higher ages and less nuanced in case of ages which are lower. So in the 5-year period, the same things have to be repeatedly done, but in a more nuanced manner. As the ages progress, you need to make it more nuanced and more new kind of pedagogies, more complex pedagogies need to be adopted. And there the repeatedness has to be built in the whole system. with regards to diverse curriculum and repeated pedagogy and pedagogies of action. These are the things, keywords for the foundational education stage. Next is design your lesson plan or unit, and creating a documentation journal is very important for every child. The teacher leader should have a documentation journal, how he is progressing, what kind of intelligence did he show, and a written record of that needs to be kept. Then only it can be referred. And when there are several teachers, it can be triangulated as well, and if, that can help in development of a innovative environment in the school, as well as triangulation will help in identification of the interest, inclination, passion in a very effective and efficient manner. And the last is implement the plan. Teachers have to become reflective practitioners. They need not only be implementers of whatever is happening and whatever is being directed to them. They need to become reflective practitioners and researchers in their own right, and they need to develop their own set of identification tools, scales, strategies as to how children progresses, because that is going to help them become a more master trainer kind of a teacher, because they will be more advanced and nuanced teacher only if and only if they are able to build in this kind of a framework. Now coming to this whole idea of the Q matrix or the question matrix for higher order thinking. So one needs to build this kind of a matrix, and the questions like linked question, inferential question and extended questions. So there are different stages of these questions, and these needs to be related to, if you look at the rows, there are present, past, possibility, probability, prediction, imagination. So that is what we are talking about. And event, situation, choice, person, reason and means. So these are in the columns. So based on that, several questions can be framed. So question framing is a very important part of thinking process, and thinking process not only in a analytical thing. In any situation you need to think and act accordingly and act in real time when you become from a novice to a master. So that is why this thinking process needs to be initiated as well. So these are the kind of question one needs to ask. Relating it to, as we move further in the week 2, as we mark the completion of week 1 and move further in week 2, in the next lectures we will move in week 2, and we will be talking about designing and curating TPEC for foundational education leadership. We will be talking about specific pedagogies to use, what kind of curriculum to use, how much of technology to use and not use, and we will develop a whole blueprint for the foundational education stage and provide it. But before that, we need to also understand how the foundational education stage, the stage of exposure and identification, is related to the curricula, the various kinds of curricula, the languages, the social sciences, the mathematics, the arts, the, the sports, and uh, other kinds of subjects that are there in the curricula. So how it relates and how the multiple intelligence framework of bodily, kinesthetic, musical, rhythmical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, linguistic, naturalistic, then and several others, analytical, moral, existential, etc., relate to this whole idea of curricula and pedagogy. So these all details we will carve out in the next lectures. I hope that you have been able to cover a long ground, and you have been able to understand what foundational education leadership is all about. It is all about creating a diverse set of curricula, pedagogy of action and repeatedness to expose people and to help them identify the predilection towards intelligences they have. So that is the primary purpose of the strategies to be used has to be multifold and diverse in nature. So that is what needs to be understood at this stage. I also urge all of you to go through the readings on Harvard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, its educational implications, as well as the teaching learning methods, etc., as well as the one size does not fit all strategy and why a multi-pronged strategy is required, and then also attempt the assignment on designing uh, a whole, so designing not the curricula and the pedagogy which you will do in the week 2. In week 1 what you have to do is you have to design a strategy at the education for the educational in general and the foundational education in particular. So I urge all of you to also attempt the assignment and upload it in either PDF or Word file, and with all the diagrams and all that, whatever tables, diagrams you can draw, please elaborate using tables, diagrams, figures, etc. So that is why I am giving you the option of uploading a PDF or a Word file as the assignment. So please do that, and with that I would like to end this, and thank you and looking forward to meet you in week 2.